record. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you can see my slides. Okay, I'm going to talk today on an introduction to metabolism. So the unit that we're studying right now is called power, and it's about how do human beings get the energy to carry out their life functions that they need. And as we've already established yesterday, we established that there are 3 substances that humans must have in order to stay alive. And they are, number 1, you've got to have food. And how long can you live without food? Well, we learned yesterday about 3 weeks, because even if you're not eating, your body is going to start to digest itself, because guess what? You're made of food. Wow. Okay. The second thing you've got to have is water. You can live without water only 3 days. Water's much more important. And the last one we learned was oxygen. And we can only live without oxygen for about 3 minutes before the brain begins to shut down and die. And once the brain is gone, you're kind of done yourself. So what I want to talk about today in this unit is about food. Oh, and let me put it on this right here. Okay, so what is food? Okay, I've got here a couple beautiful, I've got a chicken sandwich and a cheeseburger sandwich and some fries. So what is in food here? Okay, the first thing is carbohydrates. The bun on your burger or your delicious chicken sandwich is carbohydrates. The tomato, if you like that on there, and the lettuce, and even your French fries, all those things are carbohydrates, right? And if you've ever tried to do a low-carb diet, you know what a drag it is to try to not eat bread or delicious French fries, right? But that's not just it. That's only one type of food. There's actually 3 different types of biomacromolecules in food. The second are lipids, like the cheese on your cheeseburger and the mayonnaise on there. Those are lipids, and they're high calorie, right? Your French fries are fried in lipids, so there's some lipids on there. And lastly, we have protein, the chicken on your chicken sandwich, the ground beef in your hamburger. That's protein. So these are the 3 inputs of food that we use to make energy. And when we're talking about carbohydrates, what we will learn is that carbohydrates are just big molecules that are put together kind of like Tinker Toys. And the building blocks of carbohydrates are simple sugars, like glucose, right? So glucose is a sugar. And if you put long strings of glucose together in the correct way, you get starch, which is what French fries are, or pasta, or rice, right? Anything that's sweet or these white foods, those are all carbohydrates, and they're high energy molecules. If you're eating protein, that again is put together out of building blocks that are called amino acids. And there's 20 different amino acids that we use. Right, I have shown here is the amino acid methionine, which is one of the 10 essential amino acids. Your body doesn't make very much methionine, so you've got to have it in your diet. Lastly, there's lipids, which are fats and cheeses, all that yummy good stuff. And they are built of building blocks, just like the other 2, of fatty acids. And we've got a picture here of a particularly favorite fatty acid of mine. This is oleic acid, which is the main fatty acid in olive oil. Now, here's the thing. We take all of those high energy molecules into our body, but we can't use them in that way. Human beings have to convert carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. We have to convert them to our energy molecule, which is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So it's sort of like if you go on a vacation around the world or in Europe, right, and you come back with all these different currencies, you can't spend them at McDonald's here in the United States. You've got to go to the bank and you've got to exchange your foreign currency for the currency we use here. That's the same thing. We take in a lot of high energy, but then our bodies have to convert it to the one energy currency our body uses, which is ATP. And so as we covered yesterday, right, we learned that in the rule of threes, food in the form of glucose, oxygen in the form of air, and water are used to carry out this reaction called aerobic respiration. Let's just remind you of what that is, right? We eat glucose. Even if you're eating proteins or you're eating fats, our biochemistry is going to convert it into some relatively glucose-like molecule. So we can pretty much capture all of our food into the equation for aerobic respiration as just glucose. And you know we have to breathe. If we don't breathe, we're not alive long. And this is where we get our oxygen from. And from that, we make our ATP energy, right? And every single cell in your body is responsible for getting glucose and oxygen out of the bloodstream and making their own ATP energy. Every cell. If a cell doesn't do that, that cell is going to die. And then there's some waste products. CO2, carbon dioxide, which we get rid of every time we exhale, where our lungs are throwing away carbon dioxide, which we don't want, and water. Water is a waste product. And this was kind of one of a confusing thing in the rule of threes, right? Because we said human beings have to have glucose and oxygen and water. So why do we need to consume water when we create it as a waste product? Well, this is why. The water you create as a waste product is from cellular respiration, right? Aerobic respiration. And that's going to be put into your bloodstream. The water that you need to stay alive can't come from your bloodstream. It has to be in your stomach. And let's talk about why that is. When you eat food, you have to break that hamburger down, all the carbohydrates, into glucose. And when you eat proteins, you have to break them down into amino acids. And when you eat cheese, you have to break those down into fatty acids. A piece of Swiss cheese is too big to absorb in your bloodstream to be distributed. And we have enzymes, which are little proteins, that are going to break down your food into the small nutrients that can be absorbed in the bloodstream. So for carbohydrates, in general, that enzyme is called amylase, which breaks a carbohydrate into simple sugars. For proteins, it's a proteinase, which breaks proteins into their building blocks, amino acids. And lipids are going to be digested by lipase, which is going to break lipids into fatty acids. You might notice that all of these enzymes end in the letter ASE. Most enzymes will end in the letters ASE. Not all, but most. You can usually tell when something's an enzyme. But now here's the point of our whole lesson. These enzymes can only function in the presence of water. You've got to have water. And that is because the process of digesting your food is called catabolism. And for catabolism, which means just to break something down, you have to have water to interact with the enzymes. If there isn't sufficient water around, your enzymes can't digest your food. And you may have experienced this. Maybe if you were eating a gigantic burrito bigger than your head, and maybe you drank a margarita, but you didn't have enough water with it or something, right? That's going to be a problem. You're going to have indigestion until you drink enough water. So your enzymes in your stomach and your digestive system can break that down to the building blocks so they can be absorbed in your bloodstream. So water is a critical ingredient in our metabolism for breaking down our food to create energy. And that's why, even though we create it as a waste product, we still have to take it in, right? It works with the three main inputs of food, air, and water, as we learned from the rule of threes. And the three main outputs are ATP, our energy molecule, carbon dioxide as waste, and water also as waste, which we get rid of as urine. Now, we need water is essential for the enzymes to be able to digest your food so it can be absorbed. And how much do you need? At a minimum, you need about 1,500 milliliters of water a day. So each of these little bottles that you might get at the gas station or at the vending machine at school, right? They're about usually 500 milliliters. So if you drink one with breakfast, one with lunch, and one with dinner, you're going to be just fine, and you're going to be in perfect homeostasis, and you're not going to have indigestion. Thanks for your attention.